So this week we are talking about effective strategies to learn stuff by reading, which is really, really hard to do. So yesterday we talked about the starting point, which is creating your plan for learning, where the first thing you do is make sure you know what the goals for the learning process are. What is it you're trying to actually get out of the reading? And then to scan through the reading, notice the important points, and make yourself an outline to begin with. So if you have all of those done, then you should be pretty much set to essentially start reading and figure out what you need to do. So next thing, you want to make a plan to be able to read this in sections of some kind, and typically sections that make sense. So this is pretty focused on technical reading. Usually you will find sections literally layered out in under headings or something like that, a certain number of pages, but look at it and make sure it's an amount that you think you can digest in, honestly, a fairly short period of time. You don't actually want to be consistently reading, I don't think, for much more than 10 or 15 minutes, but definitely not more than 20 at a time. So depending on your pace of reading and your pace of sort of keeping track of stuff, choose sections that are going to fit into that shorter gap. In all honesty, I say make the sections shorter than longer, because the goal here is typically some kind of memory or being able to follow the concepts and stuff like that. So it is important to have smaller segments so you can keep track of those things. So now for each segment, you're going to follow a fairly sort of similar methodology for reading that works for you. First of all, you want to keep your outline handy. You should always read with pen in hand, as I like to say, although sometimes I read with computer or iPad in hand. I mean, same concept when you're at this level. So have that next to me so that I am ready to use it as needed. Read in a manner so that you make sure you read the words. Now, this is going to be different for different people. I am much more of an eye scanner, and I move fairly quickly through it. Now, that's important, but also I have to be careful not to overscan things. If you are a person who needs to follow it along, follow it along. If it helps you take a pen and follow it along, take a pen and follow it along. Whatever you need to do to read these sections effectively. Here is the one thing that I don't think you should do. Don't do it with a highlighter, and also don't highlight your text. It is, without question, the worst method of trying to remember things for a couple of reasons. One, it doesn't actually do anything to help you remember. It just colors something. But two, and this is the worst part, it makes you think you've learned something when possibly you haven't. Your brain really likes to trick you. It likes to be like, oh yeah, I recognize that. I colored that in orange. I definitely know what that is. No, you definitely don't know what that is, and your brain is not going to understand it unless you're very careful about it. So I am pretty much entirely against highlighting. There are studies out there that I could get my hands on that make it clear that highlighting is a bad idea. Don't do it. Don't underline things either. Don't do any of that kind of stuff. The only thing that would be acceptable in terms of writing on the page would be literally writing on the page. That would be like taking a side note of some kind. And if you're going to take a side note of some kind on a page, maybe you just put that in your outline. Or if you're going to do it, come back and transfer it to your outline, but make sure your outline is somewhere separate from the book so it is more condensed and easier to follow. As you go, so this is what you should be doing, since you should not be highlighting, put things in your outline. You can do that as sort of clustered as you think you need to. For me, sometimes I will read a couple of paragraphs and then go back and put stuff down. If you're trying to get definitions, you might, and there's a lot in a paragraph, you might read one paragraph, then get those definitions down, or go through a segment and then go back and write some stuff down. But this is where you put key concepts. Your outline should not be sentences. Not at all. The book is sentences. The text is sentences. Your outline should be pieces, fragments, segments, not sentences, even definitions, not sentences. You want it to be the shortest amount of stuff you need to really effectively understand it. And I think that's important. You should also find ways to make notes for things that you think are important for some reason or another. Hey, this is a key concept, put a star next to it. Also, a way to make notes about what you're thinking while you're reading, because that's another really good thing to do, is that if you read a paragraph and then you think, I'd like to do this with this, or this reminds me of that, find a way to denote a thought you're having associated with the material. So when I did notes, I very often did little sort of curvy arrows for bullets. So this is the next point, and this is the next point. But if I had a thought, I would put a star and be like, well, that's my thought that goes along with it. And that's useful as well. So definitely write stuff down as you go within the segment. And when you finish a segment, you should then have a written record of it, whether you did it a paragraph at a time or whether you went through the whole segment, went back and wrote a whole bunch of stuff down. Either way can work depending on what you're doing. Also, if you do note those key concepts, put the page numbers with them in the outline. It's a really key because especially if one of your goals is to use this book as a reference for any reason, you want to be able to actually reference those pieces and pages. That's super important. So then you have the page numbers in the right spots. One of the things that this can lead to is if you actually have true open book exams that you'll eventually be taking and stuff like that, you can put tabs, like little sticky tabs in the book that back relate to your notes. So if your note has a word, you can then go right to that sticky tab in the book and be able to answer a question much more quickly. So again, this is partially goal dependent. What are you trying to accomplish? Make sure your outline includes what you're trying to accomplish. If what you're trying to accomplish is to learn how to solve a math problem, somewhere in your outline should probably be the steps to solving a math problem. If it includes definitions, your outline should have definitions. If it's broad concepts, then your outline should have notes to those broad concepts and things to remind you of them. If your stuff is very image heavy, your outline should reference the images and note where they are in the book so that it'll go with it, or even make your own sketch version of something to simplify, to remind you of what the real one looks like. That's all stuff that goes in your outline. So as you read each section, so if you read for 10 or 15 or 20 minutes, that's not all reading. Some of that is writing. So maybe you're reading for 10 minutes and half of it is you read and then you write some stuff down. You read and then you write some stuff down. This is how you're going to follow and learn it. And just pick the shortest possible thing that you can keep track of. If it's a paragraph, it's a paragraph. If it's 2 sentences, then you got to summarize it in 2 bullet points. 2 sentences, you summarize it in 2 bullet points. This is how you get through it. You keep making stuff in your outline, you'll get to that reading. All right, tomorrow, we talk about taking the stuff in that outline and actually putting it in the right spots in your brain. Right now, today, we just put the reading on another piece of paper or in a digital format. It's an easier to follow one, but it's another format. It's not actually in your brain yet. Right now, it's only gone from your eyes to the page. That's an important distinction. So tomorrow, we get it into the brain.
Hey there, I hope you enjoyed those tips and that bit of information. If you want more from me, you can please like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. I talk about ADHD, study skills, college student stuff, science, biology, and a bunch of other, well, things that are interesting to me. You can also follow me on Twitter at DocBarlett, DocBarlett. See you later.